What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Nolecast. Let's get back into this thing, of course, right off the jump. Want to thank the legendary team 844 FSU Loan, 844 FSU Loan. Chad does an awesome job. 600 Nolecast listeners have been put into loans. I've done it twice. It's an awesome experience. Heck, maybe I'll do it again someday. They're just great to work with. So Chad definitely hook you up on that. If you want knowledge of the market, great rates. You want somebody to talk a little college ball with, little Knowles. I know Chad's pretty excited for this upcoming season, as well as am I. And with that, spring football is kicking off. We had the kickoff luncheon today. I want to talk a little bit about that, a little about some confidence stuff that we had from some of the coaches. A lot of Patreon questions have piled up, of course. So patreon.com/Nolecast. That's patreon.com/Nolecast. And I think we're probably going to take a lot of those tonight, actually. So let's leave this off here. Justin emailed us and he said, hey, in terms of the transfer portal and recruitment, how would you characterize the pond that we are fishing in? In other words, which teams do we compete with for players, and what does that say about us as an attractive prospect? With whom we're simply not competing, and what does that mean? Thank you. Justin, this is a great question, actually. I think it sort of helps us to set the expectations for the program as we go forward a little bit, right? When you look at this, you definitely have some things that are in your favor. And I think you also have some things that are a bit of a hindrance. So I think in your favor, obviously, is the settlement in some ways, because it allows you to have a little clarity as to where you're going to be. You know that you are not likely to be locked into the ACC until 2036, but rather until just the start of the decade. Now, the negative is that the drumbeat that it is SEC and Big Ten and nobody else, that is not going away, right? Those are the two schools who are asking, or the two conferences rather, who are asking to have 4 guaranteed bids, not just 2 or whatever, but like 4 apiece. The ACC would get 2, the Big 12 would get 2 under that current playoff proposal as they expand to 14 teams there in 2026. So you look at that. That's hard evidence right there. And I think, coming off a 2-10 season that did probably some irreparable harm to your recruiting, obviously, because it calls into question the future of this staff and of this administration. But when you have a year like that, it's just going to be difficult to go forward. Obviously, not impossible, but certainly difficult. And so how do you parse like the pool you're swimming in with the effort you're putting in with what you just put on the field is sort of part of this question that I think you have to be mindful of when you answer it. So, like I would say right now, for elite prospects at premium positions, Florida State is not really competing with the likes of like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas. Do they compete with Miami and Florida on some prospects? They do. Auburn on some, I would say they do. LSU, yes. Notre Dame, they don't really recruit a lot of kids who are also considering the Irish, so I would say that's probably not there. Oklahoma, Tennessee, Penn State. I'm just literally going down the 24/7 sports rankings here, but I think these are fairly instructive. That's a little bit more of the range that I think you see them compete with some. When I was recently at the Orlando Under Armour camp, the IMG Pro Day, well, it's Pro Night, but basically Pro Night there at IMG, and then also the Under Armour camp down there in Miami, I didn't really see or hear a lot of FSU mentioned by the elite prospects. And I think that is, hey, you just went 2-10. You didn't make the playoffs in 2023 when you got totally snubbed, and that was bullshit. We all know it. And you just went 2-10 in what is considered by many to be an inferior league. So you have some headwinds working against you. I think 2 episodes ago, I said, like, hey, I like some of these changes they made to the staff, I think, but it's very like in the moment this year focus. The focus is saving your job. I'm not entirely sure that it's clear what they're building towards, or no, that's not the right way to put that. I think the right way to put that is more, it's not entirely clear that they are building towards like a national championship contender, which is ultimately the standard in Tallahassee when things are going well. You think back to that 2023 season, that was great. 2013 season was great. They've had a number of good ones in between. But, right now it's like, shoot, they're trying to go 7-5, trying to go 8-4. Basically everything that this staff is doing, as far as I can tell. And I would do the same thing if I was in their job, if I was in their position, whether it's Michael Alford or Mike Norvell, is to try not to get fired this year, right? Try not to get fired next year. So you hear a lot of in college football now, this idea that, you're every year is its own year. And I think that part's true. And you have to try to win this year. And there's a certain element of truth to that, especially depending on your job security. But there's no doubt that, when you take Castellanos instead of Kromenhoek, I'm not saying that was entirely a choice they made. I mean, Kromenhoek didn't want to play in this offense. That I have on good authority. And I don't blame him. But that's a win this year move. And again, I think it's something that they were smart to try to do. I think you probably played the market correctly because there were not a whole lot of great quarterbacks out there. In fact, you might be able to save some money on quarterbacks if we want to talk just like blatant salary cap stuff type here, as you have a bit of a soft or a pseudo cap coming to college football with the advent of the House settlement, right? Running an offense where the quarterback's main job is to run, not throw, which is not totally true, but it's not far off, I think, if you look at a lot of the numbers. Maybe that exploits a certain market inefficiency, right? We thought about that. Maybe you could spend some money at some other positions if you're able to get a quarterback who fits your offense, but you don't face quite as much competition for that player, because he doesn't fit a lot of other offenses. I don't know. Just something to think about. Maybe you're also saving money there on receivers as well, and pulling almost like an anti-Bengals, if you will, if you guys are following at all what happened on to the Cincinnati Bengals. That's kind of wild how much money they're putting in to their receiving core this year. Okay, so I think that was a good question by Justin. So what does it mean? I think it means that you have a not completely crazy goal of making it back to the playoff within the next couple of years, of making it back to ACC contention within the next few years. But I don't think that anybody with a brain sees how FSU's recruiting, especially at the high school level, sees the effort that they put into recruiting as far as hours and just how much they care about it, and thinks that they're seriously thinking they're going to build a national title contender this way. I just don't think that's realistic right now with how they're doing it. Not when you see how some of these other programs are operating. Now, you'll beat them occasionally, especially for prospects at non-premium positions, right? You want to pay up for a backer or for a running back or a tight end, positions that are in the NFL who don't get paid because they don't impact the game in quite the same way. You can occasionally come out on top, and it's actually a great win for the staff, right? And it's very good for morale as well. There's a whole lot of stuff that's actually probably pretty good that comes with that. But Dub is Justin's leadoff question here. I think that's interesting. All right, our next question here comes from David, and David says, hey, is it true that in the Gus Malzahn offense, FSU is going to force feed one receiver to the exclusion of all others? Well, I don't know. That's interesting. I live here in Orlando. Obviously, I've seen a lot of UCF. I don't really think that has been the case, but let's dig into the data here to check it out. So in 2024, you had Kobe Hudson catch 47 balls, and the number 2 receiver on the team was Jacoby Jones at 22. Randy Pittman caught 32, but he's a tight end, even though I think you could probably say he's maybe a little more like a receiver than some tight ends are. Now, they did like Xavier Townsend a lot, but he ended up, I believe, leaving early on in the year when he was not being featured a lot. So, last year, the number 1 receiver caught more passes by actually double than the number 2 receiver did. In 2023, though, that really wasn't the case. In 2023, they had 2 good ones in Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson. And Baker caught 52 and Hudson caught 44. So to me, that is a much more even spreading. And Townsend, of course, who was better in 23 than he was in 22, at least numbers-wise, he caught 33. Now, if you go back to 2022, and Malzahn was, of course, at UCF for 4 seasons. So we have 4 seasons of data here. We can also dig in a little bit to some of his Auburn stuff, but I don't think that's really necessary because we can see how this has evolved in the last 4 seasons post COVID. So Baker caught 56 and 22, and Ryan O'Keefe caught 73. So no, pretty even sharing there. And then in 21, 21 was pretty wild. So O'Keefe caught 84 balls. Brandon Johnson, who definitely didn't have quite the same skills, caught 38, and the number 3 receiver, Jalen Robinson, he caught 18. So I would say in one of those years of the 4 that we have with Malzahn's offense at UCF, it was very clear that they were force feeding one receiver the ball. In last year, I feel like they didn't want to force feed anybody the ball, although Hudson was clearly the best player, but also that passing offense just completely sucked because Jefferson, at least as that staff told it to me, like Jefferson was not the guy they were hoping he was going to be. And then in 23 and 22, obviously no real difference there. The 1 and 2 targets got the same. So I guess that begs the question then, right? How will Florida State look as far as their pass distribution in this upcoming season? So last year, the leading receiver on the team was Ja'Kai Douglas. That's not great. And Malik Benson was number 2. Again, he's off to Oregon. That's not great. Toafili, 25 as a running back. I mean, just a horrendous passing offense for FSU last year. In the prior year, Keon caught 50 and Johnny Wilson caught 41. The year prior to that, Wilson 43 and Pokey Wilson caught 30. So a pretty even distribution of targets generally seen in this Mike Norvell offense as well. So I mean that's something to monitor there. But is Deuce Robinson like actually good enough to demand like that level of force feeding the ball and target share? And I would say that at this point in his career, I don't believe he has shown that. I mean, he caught 23 balls for 396 at USC. Like, that's not good. It's not great, but it's not special. Prior year as a freshman, 16 for 351. That's cool. I think part of it's going to be, like, does he get himself open? Like, who is your guy who you can force feed the ball on downs when the opponent knows you're going to pass? And this is actually probably my biggest question about this offense this coming year. I think we largely know what Tommy Castellanos is as a passer. I think we have a general hope or a feel. Kind of hope it's a feel, but it's probably more of a hope in what the offensive line is, at least in terms of like a reasonable supposition as to the sum of its parts based on what we've seen in actual games at prior stops from some of these transfer linemen. But what does this offense look like when the opponent knows they have to pass? Now, typically, Gus Malzahn offenses are kind of dead in the water in these situations. But when they are not, it is because they have a special guy who gets himself open without being schemed open with the benefit of run action or play action. And he gets himself open because he's that special of a player. I think if Robinson is going to have like a crazy high target number, if he's going to get 70 targets or 65 targets in what should be a very heavy run offense, and that would be quite a bit. And that would, I think, 65 targets is going to lead the team probably easily over a 12-game sample, maybe over a 13 as well, assuming this team is able to get back to bowling. It's going to be, does he get himself open himself? Because I'm sure they're going to want to try to feature him. He's a dude who I don't want to have like stop start a whole lot. I want to have him keep going almost. And he's not a DK Metcalf level of player, but in terms of stylistically, like Metcalf is much better when he stays on the run. That these big guys don't stop start extremely well. I mean, Deuce is not nearly as big as DK, I don't think, but he's also maybe a little bit more agile in some ways. But I think the analogy there kind of holds. So how will this offense be in obvious passing downs? Also, what does Squirrel White give you? Like, how does he factor in to this equation? Is he healthy? Does he regain his former speed? Like that's kind of what made him special. And when he didn't have that juice at Tennessee, he wasn't really special. Like, he wasn't good, and you're going to need him to kind of get back to his prior form if you're going to want to win some ball games this year. That's just kind of how the cookie crumbles there. All right. Third question that we got a lot from the Patreon is like, hey, with Malzahn calling the offense, how do you think this will impact what FSU is going to look like with Norvell? Like, how is he going to interact with players differently? Like, how is he going to change what he does? Can he handle somebody else calling his plays and running the offense, assuming that Mike is a lot more hands off, which I think he's already spoken to, that he will be more hands off with this offense. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, man. Like it's not lost to me that you're bringing on Gus Malzahn, who I think he was a fine offensive coach, but the running joke at Auburn, it really was a joke based in some truth. Is that in odd numbered years, Gus would call the plays, and in even numbered years, he'd step back because he wanted more, to be more of a CEO role, head coach, and just really kind of whatever to placate the Auburn boosters. But I always thought, like, I think Malzahn's a decent head coach and a decent play caller. Like, why don't you want that guy calling the plays? Unless it's really hindering his ability to manage the program. And I'm curious as to how Mike will do if he actually is more hands off. Like, is he able to connect with players on a more consistent basis who are in his program? Will he have his finger on the pulse of the program a little bit better? Maybe so. I don't know. But certainly last year, it feels like this whole thing got away from him a little bit. And maybe some of that you could see coming. I don't know that he did. Certainly his preseason comments don't indicate that he did. I think he was rather blindsided by it. And that's 100% a bad thing. And that sucks. That's on him, etc. Not really here to relitigate what we discussed in last year's shows, but maybe being a little more hands-off will allow him to have a little more connection with his players in the program, a little more kind of eye as to what's going on there. All right, Carl writes, "Hey bud, did you see the SP Plus rankings for Florida State, and did you see where their schedule ranks from Bill Connelly? I know you guys are buddies." I did, yeah. And I think this is actually a pretty interesting question here. So let's go ahead and take this. FSU's projected SP Plus is 3.2, which is 51st in the country. That is God embarrassing. And I don't think they've been that low in the preseason in my lifetime. Maybe after 09, like maybe preseason 2010, when we had a good feel that team was going to be a little better than people thought there in Jimbo's first year after the transition away from Bobby Bowden, who obviously was a legend. And, at the end, everybody loses at some point. But yeah, the schedule strength here for FSU, according to Connolly, is 30th in the country. So he has FSU winning 6.2 games. That's pretty, I think, within a reasonable range. It's slightly lower than Vegas, but not like, I guess, insanely meaningfully so, right? Let's see what the FanDuel updated odds here are for the Noles. And I could tell you just a little bit about that and what, where he'll get some of these numbers from. So Florida State right now is 7.5 juice under. So, Connolly's about a win under. Like that's not insanely off market, I would say. Some of these teams are certainly much more off market than that. But if you think about where you play some of these teams, you go play Florida there in the Swamp, and he has you about 2 touchdown underdogs there in the Swamp. Obviously, Alabama comes to town, so that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. He actually has FSU as 20-point home underdogs to the Tide. I don't think FSU will be 20-point dogs at home to Alabama. Certainly could lose by 20, but I don't think that Vegas will start them at the 20. But if you want to kind of figure out where the 6.2 number comes from, that's sort of an indication right there. So you play Miami, obviously in Tallahassee again. Miami is about a 17 rating, FSU 3.2. So call it 2 touchdowns, give you 3.5 for home, but you're still looking at being, according to Connolly's numbers, a 10-point home underdog to Miami. And I almost just want to blindly, not that Bill runs a sports book, and obviously I'm going to have Bill coming up on a future episode of Cover 3. I'm going to have Bill on. We can discuss, some of this stuff, but I almost just want to blindly take FSU as massive dogs in some of these games, just with the idea that with better continuity and like guys who like each other a little more on the team, a little better continuity, a little better chemistry, perhaps they're able to kind of have things come together for them, maybe slightly, but 51st is that's rough. 30th strength of schedule. Florida with the number 2 ranked strength of schedule. Connolly has them with 6.6 wins. So, if you look at that, I think he thinks Florida's schedule is probably about 2.5 wins more challenging than that schedule that FSU has, which I don't know. I mean, probably like that's not outrageous to think, but it's also probably not like guaranteed that that is how it will net out. All right. If you want some further context on this, Connolly System sees FSU as less than a touchdown favorite on the road at Stanford. Not a big favorite at all, actually, at Virginia, which is, man, if you lose that Virginia game, that is going to be problematic for sure. So, under a touchdown favorite there, which I mean, under a touchdown, sure, but I don't know, like under a field goal, that would be a little rough. A field goal favorite at home against Pitt, less than a field goal favorite at home against the Hokies, and of course, Wake Forest. He has basically FSU. That's actually a fairly good home field advantage there for the Noles. About 10-point favorites at home against Wake, and then the game at Clemson. Of course, he has FSU as underdogs of 18. So basically, like seeing the Miami to some extent, but definitely the Bama and the Clemson games as being largely uncompetitive, and the UF game as being uncompetitive. And you might be pissed about that. I think you have every right to be as a booster and donor and supporter of this program, but also in some ways, baby steps, I guess we could say, because last year there were a lot more games than just those 2 or those 3, which were not competitive. So we will see how that goes. All right, let's go ahead and talk now about FSU's change in media policy for spring football. They're going to decide not to have media in for spring football. They're going to close practices. So this is a pretty stark departure from the policy that Mike Norvell had before, which, he was a guy who was extremely transparent and, thought that it was really important that he have open practices so fans could have an idea and a connection to what's going on. And they wanted to kind of showcase what they were doing, build the program, all that stuff. Now they definitely like strongly limit what you can actually report. Like reporting is sometimes a loose word there. You're not supposed to report like injuries, depth chart information, all that kind of stuff, which seems kind of crazy. It when you think about all the other major sports, but like if somebody gets hurt in an NFL practice or baseball practice or basketball practice, you're going to know about it. But there's this weird kind of cloak of secrecy that colleges are still allowed to operate under. I don't know if they're going to bring back media access for the fall. So I think it brings some interesting questions. Why did they do this now? Is it because they're installing a new offense and a new defense they don't want people to see? Sure. I think that's entirely possible, right? You're running and you have a major opponent to open the year in Alabama coming to town. You want every advantage you possibly can get. I guess. Sure. That actually makes a good bit of sense. This is probably closer to what a lot of people have than what they have had. So that's fine. Do I think it's because they had guys who had nice springs last year who got media hype? In many cases justified, by the way, based on how they were playing. And then they went and hit up the school for more money with their NIL deal. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, actually. And so it does make you wonder, like, was this change coming had they not had a new staff? I don't know. I think it's harder to justify a change like that if you didn't. Although if you go 2-10, maybe any change can be justified. So one change you should consider is Matt Lewis. Matt Lewis of Congruity HR. Matt Lewis absolutely crushes for us. I think we have like 9 Nolecast businesses now signed up to them. Link in the show notes. Matt will get you hooked up, whether it's payroll, HR solutions, logistics, obviously healthcare now as well. Matt does a great job and can hook you up. That's Congruity HR. Link in the show notes. Hit them up. Uh, what else do we have on this? Do I think it's going to negatively impact the program? Not really. I don't think. But I don't think it's all that positive. It's not like Gus Malzahn or Tony White are running things or schemes, at least, that the rest of the college football world is unaware. They know kind of what these guys run. It's really not that much of a surprise when you see it. Malzahn's been calling plays for 15 or 20 years now in college football, and Tony White probably for about a decade. So doesn't seem necessarily to be all that big of a deal in terms of what kind of systematic advantage you may get. Okay. I do think it hurts like the better media outlets out there, because those guys are generally going to be better at like having an actual plan, coming up with story ideas, talking to the sports information staff, like, hey, I want to do this story. I want to do that story. Like noticing things in practice, not that are like state secrets, but just being able to comment accurately or more accurately if you can. I don't think anybody really saw 2-10 coming last year, including this staff who was extremely high on this team last year and whiffed it, including like Nick Saban and the guys on game day who were totally singing their praises until the Georgia Tech game happened, right? So I don't know. We'll see what comes of this. I'm not going to make a huge deal out of it, but I think you also have to realize, like, if you're going to close practices, you can't be all stick, no carrot, right? And people have a job to do with reporting. And if you close practices, I pretty much guarantee you that a lot more stuff can get reported than you realize. And sometimes it's better just to keep media there a little bit closer to you, I think, especially coming off 2-10. So, we'll see what happens. Oh, before I move on, I do wanted to read. Norvell said in a statement, in a day and age where so many people have access to our players, I want to create an atmosphere free of outside perspectives during our time of preparation and development. Okay. So, all right. Yeah. I mean, that is what it is. It's not going to affect Nolecast all that much. Injury-wise, Shaim Brown and Conrad Hesse are going to miss most of spring, if not all of spring. So we'll see. But other than that, I think this team is fairly healthy, which is good. Now, I told you last episode or 2 episodes ago that they do like Earl Little a whole lot. They also had some positive things to say about Earl Little last year, and then he was basically unplayable in games. So, again, I think you can be a little more open and honest about players now that they're getting paid. It's not like, hey, you're commenting on student athletes. Like, these guys are pros, just like dudes in the NFL. And Little, like his reaction times and instincts last year were just so bad that it makes me really wonder. It makes me hesitant to believe the hype. And some of the guys who are hyping him, I think, are dudes who generally know what they're talking about. But also recall that Little could barely get on the field at Alabama, and then he was garbage last year. So, like, his play, I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot of potential there still. He does have a lot of physical ability in his game, but, we'll have to see it on the field. Like, I got to see the instincts. I don't really care to hear about how he's looked good in drills or in, like, spring conditioning, because I need to see a guy who can trust his eyes, understand, like, make sure he sees what he needs to see on the football field, trust it, and then goes and does it. Not sure how many of you guys have been checking out Charlie Park, but Charlie Park is awesome. Just one of the many awesome restaurant concepts that Matt Thompson has. Obviously, Madso Township, a number around Tallahassee. You guys need to be checking out Charlie Park. Got graduations coming up. Great space to celebrate. Drinks, food, they have it all. Charlie Park Rooftop is a great spot there in Tallahassee. Another thing pretty good recently, maybe not quite Charlie Park good, but pretty damn good. FSU baseball team is crushing. They smoked Boston College over the weekend. Pitching continues to roll. I know they hit a bunch of nukes, which was really cool too. Florida, okay, like that game happened, but I'm probably going to take the boys to the game there in Jacksonville on the 25th. So Looking forward to that. That's like next Tuesday, I think it is, or yeah, about next Tuesday. Should be pretty fun, and it looks like an awesome experience for a lot of young Noles to get out there as well and to check it out. So if you're there, make sure you come and say hi. I'm probably about 85-90% that we're going to go and do that next Tuesday. Should be a pretty good time. But I think you got to love what you're seeing from this team. Like, if the bats go silent against really good pitching, that's probably a concern. But I think you have a pretty good feel that this team is going to be able to get a lot of outs. They run the bases better. They pick up the baseball pretty well, and they really can pitch. So you do that. You get out there to Omaha. You get enough guys who can, maybe hit some home runs. All right, like that. I think you're starting to work with something here with FSU baseball, man. And I'm excited. Like, this is something that is pretty solid. I don't have much more to add to the Luke Laux thing. It's going to come down in this day and age to how much like team chemistry can you foster? Can you balance that out with like who's making more NIL wise, which matters some, but like in any workplace, there's going to be some guys who make a lot more money than some of the other players on the team, and that's just something you got to just kind of deal with. But also, like, how much NIL will you have to play with? Does it actually make sense for FSU to care about basketball in any way, given the way that the ACC is divvying up revenue and like obviously the way that the SEC is just spending on basketball players right now like crazy. It's wild. 14 SEC basketball teams making the NCAA tournament is crazy. Like I don't know. I mean, if I'm FSU, I would consider just punting basketball, but like I don't really love the sport of basketball. Like I like watching it when FSU's good, but I'll admit I front run it when they suck. I don't really like. It doesn't bother me like when FSU football sucks or when FSU baseball sucks. Obviously, a little bit lesser extent with baseball than with football. So I'm very interested to see if FSU baseball can keep this up. I'm interested to see what FSU basketball can do on the recruiting trail to kind of get a baseline for the level of talent you're going to bring in here. But I do think there's a chance just to have a positive regression type moment here with just a new voice in the program. And obviously not that Hamilton was a bad coach. He was an excellent coach for a long time, especially with some of that culture stuff. I think he did a really good job with that. But ultimately, new voice was needed. And I think Luke Laux is, just from what I've read, people I've talked to, is probably about as good as they could have done with the resources that are available to them. So keep those Patreon questions flowing in. Not going to hype this team too much, obviously, but we will see where they go, and we'll have some more spring intel coming soon. Take care, y'all.